come in to see you going,
Welcome back. I'm Catherine Palafis with Mike Gaba, and we're visiting with another New Mexico media maker, local writer, director, Scott Milder. Thank you for visiting with us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
So Scott, tell us how you became a filmmaker. What's that journey been?
Well, I consider myself primarily a writer, and I really got serious about writing when I was in middle school. I wanted to be Stephen King, basically, was my goal. And so I thought I'd be a novelist, and then spent pretty much all of my teen years writing. I wrote 2 novels by the time I was 18, both of which are really bad, of course. And countless short stories. I had something like 1,500 rejection letters from magazines and about 4 acceptances. And I just got to the point where it was just really lonely, just sitting in front of your computer typing is really lonely. Sure. But I knew I still wanted to be a storyteller. I've always been a movie geek. So I thought, well, I'll give this a shot. So I decided to go back to school and get a second bachelor's degree in film, just not really knowing what I was going to do with it. But I took a screenwriting class with Matt McDuffie at UNM and just pretty much took to it like a fish to water. So that's where it all started.
So you said you wanted to be a writer like Stephen King. So do you feel, for someone who's so popular like that, do you feel like anything you write, are you conscious of trying not to copy him, but you feel like you are, and then other people are reviewing your material? Is there that kind of conundrum going?
I would say I used to be more. I feel like and this is probably true of any artist, when you first start, imitation is how you learn. Right. And if I've reread some of the short stories that I wrote when I was like 15, and it's definitely Stephen King light. But I think over the years I've kind of developed my own voice. I've kind of moved away from writing the type of things he's known for and kind of in my own direction. So I don't really think about it anymore. But yeah, it's definitely early on. That was definitely
What was your first film project like?
Well, the first screenplay I wrote, in retrospect, was a mess. Although it was really ambitious. It was full of flashbacks. And I described it as Clerks meets David Lynch.
Wow, that was a party.
Yeah, it was hard to sum up in a log line, probably. But from there, I kept working on feature scripts. I wrote 3 or 4 feature scripts while I was in college. And then I got involved with the Duke City Shootout back in 2002. And by 2004, I had written a short script that got accepted into the festival. So that was kind of my first time really, I'd done a couple little student projects and things. So it was my first time really directing something that had any production value to it. And I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it. I was really intimidated by the process of filmmaking. It seemed too technical and too much work. I'm not a really, confrontational type of person. My image of the director was the guy with the bullhorn yelling at people, telling them what to do, and that's just not really my personality. But once I got on set, I figured out that, you can kind of take whatever approach works best for you, and I think I learned that being a director is as much as anything as being a cheerleader for the project, which I am very good at. So. Yeah, so, and that was when I first started working with the team that I've been working with now 10 years. So we've kind of got a nice, close-knit little group.
All in Albuquerque?
Mostly. I've done a couple short films in Boston. I went to graduate school in Boston. Done a few things out in LA. But as far as production stuff goes, as a writer, I'm working with producers in LA all the time, kind of separate from my own stuff that I do here. And as far as production goes, it's mostly pretty focused in New Mexico.
What's one of the projects you're really proud of that you did here?
Well, the one that everyone always remembers, probably more than anything else, was a short film we did called Sweetie back in 2007 that we did for the 48-hour film project. It was just a guy in a basement talking to the body of a dead girl that he had in his freezer. But it's
a real uplifting kind of.
Well, it actually weirdly is kind of like a romance.
I can see where Stephen King influenced your career.
And it was, it was something we spent $200 on. It's essentially one actor in one location, and it went all the way to the Cannes Film Festival.
Congratulations!
Thank you. So that's one I'm still very proud of. Another film I did about 2 years ago called Send, which is actually very similar. It's 27 minutes of a woman talking into a webcam, talking to her daughter through a webcam, and then something happens that kind of upsets the apple cart, so to speak. And it's basically watching this woman degenerate before your eyes. And it's one shot, all just her talking to the camera. That's probably, as a writer goes, from a writer's perspective, that's probably my favorite thing I've done.
Sounds Hitchcockian too with that film.
Yeah, kind of. And it's also very, it's very claustrophobic. I think that's one thing I'm really interested in is, you know, people going insane in tight spaces seems to pop up a lot in my movies.
So as a writer, do you think some things are sort of self-revealing whether or not you intend them to be?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that Sweetie was actually an interesting experience for me in terms of, you know, I always thought of myself as a genre writer. I came from, you know, Stephen King was my biggest influence, and you know, I love gangster movies and horror movies and things. In Sweetie, you know, when we were coming up with the idea, it was just, oh, isn't this a messed up idea? You know, guy's got a dead girl in a freezer. And it weirdly became about my relationship with an ex-girlfriend without me even realizing it. And that's when I realized I can kind of do both. I can do something that's personal and kind of expressing something about myself while at the same time doing a messed up movie about a guy with a dead body in the freezer. So
You're growing as an artist.
yeah, exactly.
So you say you're a cheerleader for your projects. What's the project you're cheerleading about right now?
Well, right now, Dead Billy, it's a feature film. It's our first feature film that we're doing here in Albuquerque. We
Excellent.
raised about $30,000 over Kickstarter over the summer.
That's a big feat.
Yeah, and I think we were kind of maybe one of the first locally to really do the Kickstarter thing. And I think
Yes.
we got in right under the wire before everybody was trying to do it. And, you know, we're about 2/3 of the way through production. We're taking a break for the holidays, and then we're picking up again in February. And it's been an amazing process. You know, I'm working with the team that I've been working with for years, but then we've added, you know, 15 other people into the mix, and everyone has been great. And, you know, Lauren Myers is the star, and she's a local actress who's just phenomenal. So it's been, you know, it's a $30,000 movie, but we're looking at it and we're saying, you know, this is gonna look and feel like a $500,000 movie. So
Fantastic.
Awesome.
yeah, we're very
Now,
proud of it so far.
I've always been fascinated by writing and the ability to write. But the translation between writing and filmmaking, there's a trade-off usually, because of course when you write, you can just expound on your ideas forever.
Right.
But then when you have a film, of course, you have to make it marketable and you have to cut. How do you deal with that trade-off? I mean, does it hurt in a sense?
I think I'm lucky in the sense that since I do come from kind of a genre perspective, I don't think of it in terms of marketability while I'm doing it, but my sensibilities, you know, tend more towards things that just happen to be marketable. You know, horror movies are always marketable. Thrillers are always marketable. So I feel like I don't have to work at it too much. If anything, you know, I get to work within this framework of a genre and then get to go into my own idiosyncratic direction within it and kind of trick people into it. You know, people think they're going to go get a horror movie and they actually get this kind of character drama. You know, that's so in that sense, I don't find it to be a trade-off, at least in my own personal work. It has been, you know, I have a manager in LA. I've optioned some scripts out there. We're always pitching things. You know, I'm pitching some TV shows out there right now. And once you start getting notes from producers, and a lot of times they're not particularly good notes, you gotta kind of wade through it. That ends up being a skill in and of itself. You know, pitching is a skill in and of itself.
Oh.
Writing a log line is a skill. You know, it's all these things that don't necessarily teach you in film school or in a creative writing class, and you just kind of learn it by doing it.
And do you see yourself staying local with your work?
I would like to. You know, it's an open question because New Mexico is, you know, I've shot now in 4 different states, shot movies in 4 different states in this country, and New Mexico is by far the best place to make a movie, I've found, in terms of, you know, balance between, you know, ease of getting people to work for you for very little money, amazing locations, good weather, talented cast, you know, skilled crew, but without having to pay the premium that you have to pay in LA. You know, just the balance is right here, you know. So I do want to stay here. The problem is finding the money to do things. And as you know, above the line, you know, a writer director, being on more the development side of things and not the production crew side of things, which is what most people here who work in the industry do. You know, it's hard. So I'm sort of splitting time between here and LA. And probably my ideal goal is, you know, spend a certain amount of time out there doing, you know, sort of contract work and use that to position myself to be able to do more of my own personal work, which I'd be doing here.
So it always comes down to the money, doesn't it? In one way or the other, basically. And I was going to ask you, because you specialize in thriller and the horror genre, it's been done so much. How do you keep it fresh? How do you put a twist on it sometimes?
I think, you know, my approach is not to think about it. Not to, if I go in there worrying about, I got to make this different, I got to make this weird, I got to do something no one's seen before, then you're not telling the story. You know, to me, it all starts with the character. I teach screenwriting up in Santa Fe at the community college, and that's one thing I impart to my students every class, is that it's character first. It's about the choices your characters make. You know, Stephen King actually has one of my favorite quotes about this, where, you know, he compares it to playing the blues, and he says, if you look at, you know, any blues song, they're all written on the blues scale, they all have the same 3 chords, they're sort of the same song over and over again. So what is it that makes Lead Belly different than Muddy Waters, different than B.B. King, you know? And he says, it's not the notes you play, it's how you play the notes. It's the voice you put into the notes. And I feel like for me, you know, I come from, I hate to say more of a literary background, that sounds pretentious, but when I say literary, I mean like pulp horror, so not like, you know, not literary, but, you know, my first love is books and reading and writing, and I think I bring that into the screenplays I write. So that automatically kind of differentiates them in a way where my influences aren't Quentin Tarantino or John Carpenter or Alfred Hitchcock, or, you know, so much as it is Stephen King and Peter Straub and Richard Matheson and H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe, and all, you know, that's where I draw my biggest influences from. And I think that is something that has helped me kind of differentiate myself from a lot of other people who are working in the same genre.
Right. Scott, thank you for coming in today and
Thank you.
keeping your talent in New Mexico. We're going to hold on to you for as long as we can.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes.
We've got the keys to your car, so you're not going anywhere.
Can't believe you told him that. So that does it for this episode of New Mexico Media Makers. We'd like to thank both of our guests today, Joseph Bavenzi and Scott Milder. Be sure and join us next week to find out what's hot and happening in New Mexico. Until then, this is Catherine Plofis and Mike Gaba.
Hey.
Reminding you, keep smiling. You never know when you're going to be on camera.